when my son was about 3 to 4 years old, he drew an elephant artistically to my amazement. And since that time, I often wonder, why are there those who are artistically gifted, and there are those who seem to have no gift at all? So where are you in that those two sets? Anyway, in the book of Exodus, in the Old Testament, God gave the Israelites, who were then a ragtag nation of ex-slaves, God gave them an imposing project to undertake. They were actually given this detailed plan to build a magnificent artistic tent of meeting. And that tent they would carry as they traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land, which is Israel today and Canaan before. They were given a detailed plan to construct that. And interestingly, the Lord chose certain people and through the Holy Spirit enabled them with skill, ability, and knowledge to perform creative tasks for His purpose. So from here, we learn at once that God blesses each one with creative skills for the good of all. There is no one without a gift. Do you believe that? Well, let me prove that to you somehow, and I hope at the end of this talk, I hope you would have reflected and, okay, I'm gifted, I know that. But you see, even though God blesses each one with a gift, with a talent, with a skill, it's a partnership actually. It's a partnership between God and us, the Creator and the created. Now, let's see first God's part. Okay? Well, first, it is worth noting that there are two aspects of creativity. Okay, so you can be both, or you can fall in either one of them. The two aspects are giving and doing. In Exodus 35, where we will really be reading that chapter, in Exodus 35, verse 5, it says there, "From what you have, take an offering for the Lord. Everyone who is willing is to bring to the Lord an offering of gold, silver, and bronze." And this was commanded by God through Moses because they were about to construct that tent, that artistically made, that detailed plan of a tent where it will be their house of worship. Now let's go to verse 20, and it says there, "Then the whole Israelite community withdrew from Moses' presence, and everyone who was willing and whose heart moved him came and brought an offering to the Lord for the work on the tent of meeting, for all its service, and for the sacred garments." So that's the first aspect of being gifted. You are gifted to give. You are gifted with the raw materials for creative work. Have you thought of yourself like that? That you are actually capable of giving so that those who are skilled can perform their skill. That's the first aspect. And in verse 10 of chapter 35, interestingly, the Lord commanded all who are skilled among you are to come and make everything the Lord has commanded. And from verse 11 downwards, it's a detailed instruction of how to construct it. But all who are skilled among you are to come. So this is the doing part. Those who are skilled are to craft each piece needed in the work of constructing that they call it a tabernacle, a tent of meeting. So at once we see that biblical insight here that all of us can play a part in creative work. Okay. You cannot say, "I have no talent," but you can give, right? And if you really observe, those who are not gifted so much are those who have more resources. Think about that. And those who are gifted are at times without any resources. Right? There are many singers maybe, or painters, or people who can see something out of the ordinary. And if they only have the resources, they can build something, they can do something, they can perform something for the common good. So therefore, both has talent, those who give and those who can do it. Or you can say, well, as I have said a while ago, I can do it, but I have nothing to begin with. You know what you can begin with? You can begin by casting a vision of something that you know will benefit others. Something artistic, something creative. Something artistic always inspires people. And actually, that is what makes us animate as a people. That I believe that's what makes us humans. We are able to create. Now, some of you are like, in your pockets, you have smartphones. Smartphones were 20 years ago. There were no smartphones, but out of raw materials comes something that has been created that was not there before. Your very work tomorrow, you'll be creating something that was not there before. Not that you created it out of nothing, but you created from raw materials, and God has given you that creative talent. So you can either give or you can either do it. And both of them are actually God's gifts of knowledge and talents and resources. So cast the vision. Second, first, it is worth noting that there are two aspects of creativity, and what are they? Giving and doing. Second, realize that the Creator appoints and enables. Third, go back to chapter 35, verse 30. It says there, Then Moses said to the Israelites, See, the Lord has chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And he has filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill, ability, and knowledge in all kinds of crafts. It's actually a duo, like a Batman and Robin. They're called Bezalel and Oholiab. They were like the people who will lead the artisans, the crafts people, and they will build this tent. Okay, and if you know the history of Israel, these are ex-slaves from Egypt. So Bezalel and Oholiab were singled out from all the skilled people to reflect. I believe this was written here in order to reflect God's character. And I'll give you about 3 truths. Truth number 1. It's a truth. And I hope you hold on to it. First of all, every person God has enabled. And this is what we can see from these verses. This is why we have different and unique talents and gifts. So don't compare your gift, your skill to others, because yours is unique. And some of you are still really? So that's the first truth. God has given you a gift and God has enabled you. Okay? Truth number 2. Once enabled, once you discover a gift, God has a purpose for that gift. Okay? No man is an island, right? The tabernacle, and I'll show you like a rough, maybe sketch of it. This was a big tent that they carried around in the desert. It was so artistic. You could have just built a tent and that was it. But God gave a detailed plan of the color of the curtains, how it would be dismantled, how it would be constructed, how the gold will be inlaid, and etc. It was a detailed work of art. And at once we see that this tent was created this way because God wants to showcase His creative and redemptive work. And that word is quite heavy, right? The redemptive work, but that's reserved for another message maybe. But I believe our gifts are at its best when we use it to fulfill what is in the heart of God. The happiest artists are those who discover inspiration. And inspiration, I believe, cannot be manufactured. Passion and creativity it's not just a brain thing. Okay, what part of the brain is the artistic? Is the left or the right? I can't remember now. Anyway, Those enabled and appointed, and this is the third truth. Those enabled and appointed are empowered by the Spirit of God. Inspiration and ingenuity cannot be manufactured and not simply a brain thing, but I believe it's a God thing. I think God raises up people who actually begins to invent things for the good of all. Technology, wow, I'm amazed at how a single person can actually drive a company to produce something that was not there before. How an artist can paint a ceiling of a church, of a basilica, and remains there. And even today, people go there to see this work of art, and there's something in their souls that gets inspired. I don't think that's simply a human thing, but it's a God thing. And you have that. You have that. You have either a skill, a knowledge, or a talent. And I've said a while ago, even giving. Your resources. God gave you resources because that's God's gift to you so that others may benefit. So God's part, therefore, is to endow us with the potential for craftsmanship. In verse 33, if you would like to go there, in verse 33 of chapter 35, so Moses called this Bezalel and Oholiab, and in verse 33, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of artistic craftsmanship. In the Bible, there's such a phrase, artistic craftsmanship. And in Hebrew, it's this word, it's melaka. And melaka is how that phrase is translated. And I'm showing you this Hebrew word because it's the same word in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. Remember that poem about the creation where God at the end of the 7 days, it says in verse 2, by the 7th day God had finished the work. That word work is the same root word or almost the same word as melaka. When he had finished the work he had been doing, so on the 7th day he rested from all his work. And he said it was good. Wow. Do you know that the God who created the heavens and the earth has given us an attribute of being a person who can create as well. Not out of nothing, but out of what we have. And that is what we see. The tabernacle was full of detail and design that it harnessed every potential resource, skill, ability, and knowledge, pushing their giving and their doing to the level of artistic craftsmanship, melaka, artistic creative work. God, the Creator, created us to be creative and the ability to create from what we have. And I believe God endows each one of us with gifts and talents, and then you know what God does? He pushes us to projects. He pushes us to achieve more as a student. God somehow pushes you to be part of a band or part of a group who can sing, or even in school and when you're already an adult, God gives you an opportunity, and sometimes we shrink back. I cannot do it. But think again. Maybe God is pushing you so that this potential and artistic energy becomes kinetic, artistic endeavor, so that through certain projects we may excel in our gifts. Do you believe? I believe that. I believe that because I see that happen in this church. Just yesterday, if you're entering, this church looks so beautiful this weekend. Everything is ordered and everything is done right because people came yesterday and pitched in their creative work. There's also creativity in pulling out weeds, right? Because people can just pull out weeds and it's so organized. If I pull out weeds, I leave things behind. But even in the simple things, God brings them together and out comes melaka, artistic craftsmanship. And there's something when the community volunteers, when the community goes out of their way, giving their time, energy, and effort, without expecting anything in return, and they come together, artistic craftsmanship begins, and God somehow reveals Himself. Wow. So that's God's part. Now how about our part? As I've said a while ago, God blesses us, each one of us, with creative skills for the good of all, but it's a partnership. Both the creator and the created play a part. So what is our part? First, our part is to be willing. What is our part? If you'd like to, underline your books in the Bible, in chapter 35, there are almost 6 times it says they're willing. Those who are willing. That's what's great about our God. He does not force us. Those who are willing, give. Those who are artistic, who are willing, do it. It's all here. Look at in verse 5, everyone who is willing to bring to the Lord offering of gold, silver, or bronze. In verse 20, then the whole Israelite community withdrew from Moses' presence, and everyone who was willing and whose heart moved. In verse 22, all who were willing, up to 36, chapter 2. So our part is to be willing. Willing to share what we have, willing to create for others. Going back to chapter 25, verses 1 and 2. Okay, I'd like to go there. Go to chapter 25 of Exodus, verse 1 and 2, and it says, the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. You are to receive the offering for me from each man whose heart prompts him to give. Whose heart prompts him to give. Creativity is prompted by a willing heart. And my background is engineering, so I'll give you a formula of creativity. And this is it. I believe skill, talent, or a gift, plus a willing heart will result in creativity. We see that in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. Give. If you decided in your heart to give because God loves cheerful givers. Melaka in the area of giving and doing cannot be forced. Artistic craftsmanship cannot be forced. You cannot pay a man to be artistic. You can, but a person who does it artistically and it comes from inspiration, it comes from, even if he or she is not paid, it's very powerful. To be willing is a necessary prerequisite as the Lord challenged the people to embark on His project. So God may have endowed us with resources or with gifts and talents and the opportunity to use it, but if we're not willing, artistic craftsmanship, melaka, cannot happen. Wow, this is really wonderful. In Genesis, God created the world, melaka, in an artistic way because He wants to do it. He was willing to create. And He gave us that. So second, our part is to be willing. And second, we must be willing to uplift one another. To uplift also ourselves. Creativity uplifts not only the one who does the work, but also those who acknowledge his or her craft. Do you love creative people? I like creative people because I feel sometimes I'm not that creative. I love to see people just putting their hands and their minds into something, and out comes work and something there that was not there before. But you see, not only is the artist or the gifted uplifted, but those who see their work are also uplifted. It affects them. Have you watched a good movie lately? Right? Especially movies that inspire. Have you written a poem lately or have read a poem lately? So you see both the poet and the reader enjoys. Both the director and the viewers enjoy. The tabernacle was a nationwide project that resulted in such upliftment. Going back let's go to chapter 36. And in verse 2, it says there, then Moses summoned Bezalel and Oholiab and every skilled person to whom the Lord had given ability and who was willing to come and do the work. It says there. Let's continue to read that. Chapter 30, verse 2. And then in verse 3, they received from Moses all the offerings the Israelites had brought to carry out the work of constructing the sanctuary. And the people continued to bring freewill offerings morning after morning. So all the skilled craftsmen who were doing all the work on the sanctuary left their work and said to Moses, Moses, wait a minute, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord had commanded to be done. There were so many people who were giving that those who were skilled were saying, oh, wait a minute, we're already up to here with all of this, all the raw materials. We can't anymore work, Moses. So Moses commanded the people, stop giving because it's too much already. Have you ever experienced that? When people just give, it's just too much and you stop the people from giving? That is what upliftment does. When there's an upliftment, there's a thrust somewhere, right? When something lifts off, there's a thrust. There's a force somewhere. And that is what I would like to add to the formula we had a while ago. Remember? Gift plus willingness multiplied by what I would like to call collaborative effort. Everyone pitching in will create this thrust, this creative thrust. What we saw here in this tabernacle, people were just giving. Some gave, out came a beautiful purple curtain, and they say, let's give more because it's so beautiful. Right? The successful people who are philanthropists and those who are, those who have very big this non-profit organizations, people give to them. Why? Because there's creative thrust happening. People will not give when those who work for their own good, but people give to those who experience this. The tabernacle was a showcase of this, and people are drawn to participate in this creative increase. And I hope that happens in your own church, in your schools, in your companies. I hope you somehow be part of that. Okay? And I hope you understand what this is all about. You cannot just do it alone. You have to collaborate with others, because when collaboration happens, people just give, people just do, and out comes a beautiful tabernacle. Out comes a beautiful project that not only serves others but glorifies God. Lastly, our part is not only to be willing, not to be part of this collaborative effort, but our part is also to empower others. Very, very interesting here in verse 34. Look at chapter 35, verse 34. It says there, and he has given, 34, and he has given both him and Oholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. Wow. Not only does the Lord enable us with skills, but enables us with the ability to teach our skills to others. Before I read this, I thought there were really teachers who are good in teaching, and there are those who are not really so good. What I mean is, there are people who are good in their craft and can teach. And there are those who are good in their craft, but they can't really teach. But with this verse alone, I thought to myself, well, I think each of us are given by God that ability to empower others. Therefore, the Lord enables the student just enough skill and enables the teacher to guide the willing student to grow in the skill. Our part is not only to develop our own skills, but to empower others to develop theirs. And I hope if you have a skill, pass it on to others. Look for somebody who has the same skill and mentor them. And those who are, still young in your craft, still young in your gift, look for those who are good in what in what you like to do, and ask them to teach you. And that's the beauty of our part. Our part is also to empower others. I studied creativity from God's point of view because this is what I sorely miss from Sister Sonia. This is really what I miss. She would just approach me and tell me, Pastor, let's do this. Pastor, let's have this. The last project I did for her was that welcome mat that's there by the door. It's a very simple thing, right? But for me, that's a work of creativity. And every time I see that, I remember Sister Sonia. And she really texted me. She really gave me somehow how big it was and how she would like that mat to look like, and so that when people enter, they feel welcome. And it's just a mat. out of that mat, as I reflect, when people come together, things that are so mundane becomes very uplifting. And that's what I miss from Sister Sonia. She gave the raw materials, and I guess I had the skill to design and produce the cheapest mat I can get. But what I miss is not only the skills God has enabled her, but her willingness to share and develop her skills to the fullest and to empower child and adult alike. And that is what we are celebrating today as well. What's in it for those who will take their skills seriously? Ask any artist and artisan, and the answer they will have is this: it gives me profound joy to see my work appreciated. And that sounds almost like God's chorus line in Genesis chapter 1. And God saw it was good. God's legacy of creativity is all around us, if we stop and care to notice. Every detail is the work of a master craftsman. I think if we live our life accepting what we're good at, honing what we are good at, being generous with what we're good at, then creative thrust will also be our etched legacy.